Call the meeting to order. I want to start with the welcome to the April meeting of the Philadelphia Police Advisory Committee. I want to start with a roll call. And for some of you, I'm looking at you, Mr. Swift, who haven't been here for a while, you haven't seen our wonderful new members. So let's go through a roll call. Sean Alone, one of our wonderful new members, is excused absence. Eric Atwood has an excused absence. Ben Geffen. I'm here, Mujib. Marvin Lazenberry, another wonderful new member. George Mosey. More members. Bilal Qayyum. Okay, he is en route. Michael Ramming, excused. Naima Sanchez. Yeah. Sonia Velazquez. Michael Wehrman. And Sarah Young. Here. Okay.
And Erica's on her way.
Oh, I thought that she was out of town.
I had received a text saying in traffic.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. So we may have two other members join us. As those of you who know the format of the meeting, we're going to handle our regular business and then we'll open it up for public comment. Ms. Atwood. And we'll open it up to public comment. I understand there's been many issues recently that have brought folks here. The first item, just on the chair's report, for some of you who've been following our activity closely, you know that we have been working on the internal operating procedures. We've gone through several revisions. Those procedures have been approved and have been reported, so we have new marching orders as it were. The next item that I wanted to mention is that we, as part of our internal operating procedures, developed committees to handle particular business of the PAC. One of the committees is the Policy and Procedures Committee, which had our first meeting, and Sarah Young is going to give us a report.
So in the first meeting of the Policy Committee, we discussed some possibilities to put on our priority list for this year. So a range of items were discussed to be considered. Among them were carrying of metastatic bandages for all officers, reviewing the de-escalation policy for all officers, and then examining cases from the use of force board, instituting and also improving officer and citizen surveys, examining policies and practices around probation in the courts and police roles and illegal evictions in the city. In addition, we also discussed reviewing the field training program and the arbitration process and disciplinary policies and processes. One suggestion that came out of this meeting to help us to keep benchmarks for major goals stated in the DOJ report was to request monthly updates on progress for each of these goals from the police department at our meetings. So all of these items will be further discussed with some of the PAC commissioners when we finalize our goals for the rest of the business.
Any comments on that? So we'll set our next meeting. We're talking about the polling the committee members about our next meeting.
So we'll determine where and how of our monthly meetings after tonight's commission meeting, and hopefully set some more regular times to meet and discuss and set up a structure for our policy goals.
Thank you. Hans, you're up next.
Oh, that's quick. Hi, everybody. First, I would like to. Hello, officer. How are you doing? I was going to thank Captain O'Donnell for coming in. Oh, hey, Captain O'Donnell. I was just
No problem. I'll just thank you for coming by. We always appreciate when the district representatives come by, so thank you for coming in.
Yes.
And please feel free to join us in our conversation at any point or to interject any of you guys. So.
And Captain Malone couldn't make it. He had a previous engagement, but this is Lieutenant D'Angelo from the 3rd and Sergeant Higgins from the 3rd as well.
Great. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate it.
No problem, sir.
So just a general update for everybody. Since the last meeting, there was a fairly rigorous city budgeting process. I did prepare to participate in that we spoke at length about what the PAC might be asked about and what we might need to defend in terms of our fairly significant budget increase. Fortunately for us, I think there was enough confidence in the PAC that there was no questions and we were not grilled. So. But we were prepared to be grilled. So we did participate, but ultimately council did not ask us any questions at all, which is a fairly good thing. As everyone knows, PAC is the one civilian seat on the use of force review board. Those happen, they're scheduled monthly, but they do not necessarily happen every month if there's not enough cases. There was one this month. Around 8 cases were reviewed. The PAC prepared for them. Anthony and myself spent a lot of time looking at each case individually, pulling the appropriate policies, reviewing them to understand if we believed that the officer was in policy, and then of course taking that to the board to hear a larger presentation from the detectives in the standards and accountability team, and we were fairly satisfied with the outcome of all the cases. We did abstain, or rather disagree with with the other members on one case, but otherwise agree on the other cases, which is a good thing overall. And it was a minor disagreement, but important. And so we're excited to continue to influence that process and to have conversations around that process. As everyone knows, my background is in juvenile justice, and so I thought it important to visit the juvenile justices here in Philadelphia. I've been there before, and I've been in touch with them since. But more recently, we met with 2 groups of folks, of young people in the Juvenile Justice Services Center. How are you, sir? All right. And so those folks, those young people were broken into groups of all young men and all young women. And they gave us their experience in their contact with both the justice system but with the police, and what they feel, how they believe they were treated, and if they feel that they were treated fairly or unfairly. Like the public, we had a mixed response. Some felt they were very unfair, some had a more nuanced perspective on things, and some felt like it was, like most of us say, dependent on the officer, which was a very interesting experience for us. I can give you more information about that. In addition, prior in the first 3 months or so, I met with Deputy Commissioner Patterson, Coulter, and Wimberly. However, I had not yet met with Deputy Commissioner Sullivan and Wilson, and that's mostly my fault. So I did meet with them and sit down with them, and just to understand their fairly significant roles in the department and how we can continue to work together on that. We had there were separate meetings, but 2 very constructive meetings, and we got to know each other and got to understand each other's perspectives and how we can work together. So I was very satisfied with those meetings, and I believe they were. You'll have to ask them. In addition, as you guys have known, the PAC has met with officers from the 22nd District, the actual frontline officers, with respect to their body-worn camera program, understanding how officers are experiencing this and how they feel about it. As we know, Philadelphia has rolled into the 25th District as well as it relates to body-worn cameras. So the PAC met with, or I should say, I met with the 3 officers there to understand how they are receiving the body-worn camera program, what challenges they're having, what they appreciate, what the stumbling blocks have been, and just to understand more about this program in particular. And I've also spoken to their lieutenant, who we're in conversation with, will present at our next meeting. I can't promise that he will be there, but he has agreed to talk to me more about it and understand what that would look like. So it was a very informative meeting, most of all because I got to understand the perspective of the officers overall and the perspective of the officers as it relates to body-worn cameras. And I got a great cross-section because there was an officer who was on the job for about 2 years, an officer who was on the job for about 9 years, and an officer who was on the job for 19 years. So it gave me a great idea about how not only officers feel about their job in 2018, but how their job in 2018 with this new technology works, but also their job in 2018 with new technology based on how long they've been on the job and how that affects how they view the program. So it was very informative, and I was really impressed by just these three officers in particular and how they spoke about the program and how they meet the challenges of their day-to-day work. Yes.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
Where does the rollout stand for body-worn cameras?
So it's a great question. I think there are, as I understand it, there are two principal, and if anyone knows in the background that better than me, please correct me. There are two principal problems or concerns. One of them is budgetary, and the funding is significant. And the second is tech. That technology in each district and in the precinct, in the department overall, isn't necessarily prepared for infrastructure-wise to have this installed. And when I say installed, is a kind of a grid to get to plug in your get to dock your camera, and that isn't necessarily ready to go as quickly.
So that goes into my second question.
And before I go, and so some people have criticized Philadelphia in that New York was able to, and other cities were able to roll out larger departments in a less time, and so it's important to recognize that those are cities that can throw a lot more money at the problem.
Yeah. So, given the tech, and so, are we under contract for the full rollout or just for the pilot? Are we still considered in a pilot?
Oh, I understand. I don't know where they classify it. I believe that we are outside of a pilot in that we have decided on what camera we're using. We decided on what data storage, the strategy to store that data, the policies. All of those are fairly firm. So I don't believe that it can still be considered a pilot. I think it's the first phase of the rollout. Yes.
So in that rollout phase, given when we were initially in the pilot phase and we had gotten a scorecard based on other cities, I'd be interested in getting information from them about where we stand on the issues that were raised in our scorecard about who was chosen to be our provider. Is the provider going to provide are they developing facial recognition software in tandem with their other technological developments? What are the other things that are happening in and around that Philadelphia was criticized about or got kind of a yellow or red for in this? Because initially we were in our pilot phase, but I don't know now that we've come back and we're in a rollout phase that we've actually gotten answers that address where our scorecard lies.
Well, first, as I expect from you, Erica, that's a very thoughtful and high-level question.
She had that written down.
So about 5 words. So
I'll say this. As I've referenced the scorecard, I get a lot of pushback over the idea about when the scorecard is released. While facial recognition is a hot-button issue, the folks in DVIC, which is the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, which kind of administer how we would use those kind of cameras, really describe that, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, as more of a gloom and doom scenario. In other words, that it is possible, but not as possible as people might think based on what you might see on CSI. All right. I think to your point.
I mean, Facebook can see my
Right. Right.
I'm like, come on.
Right. No. I don't disagree with you. I think that it is closer than many people recognize. And when I say closer, I mean the idea that we might be able to use facial recognition software to create a big brother state is closer than people recognize. But they're pretty far from that now. So I think to your point, there should be careful consideration as this program rolls out and as the footage becomes more voluminous, how it's used and how long it's stored and how it can be utilized. So there are certain civil liberties. The good news is that we have some great organizations that focus a lot on civil liberties. I think one of them might have it in their title somewhere. And we can continue to work with them. And the PAC is assessing that overall, and part of our response to body-worn cameras will be a critique on the overall rollout, but also on the legs it can grow, so to speak, or how much we can consider how this can affect our civil liberties moving forward, and with a special consideration for victims and immigrants. That makes sense. Okay. Does that answer your question? Is there a third question? I'm not inviting a third question. I'm asking a third question. Thank you, Erica. No, but in all seriousness, feel free to ask questions.
And it should also be noted that the rollout will impact other criminal justice partners.
Indeed.
Like the Philadelphia DA's office, for example, they're going to need additional manpower and technology in order to view the videos when they come in as evidence.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the charging decision, to your point, right? So what that means is when someone's arrested and the charging unit who decides if the initial charge needs to exist, be upgraded or downgraded, uses that evidence or uses available evidence. And if it can be streamlined and they can get it immediately, it'll help with charging decision. So yes, I think that's, and as it relates to judges and trials and juries, all of that is really going to be affected. In some ways for better, some ways for worse. So I got thrown off there. Okay. Continued progress on survey creation and body worn camera review. I think we've understood the body worn camera review. But the survey process is just basically an understanding. There's two surveys that we're working on in conjunction with the police department. One of them is an officer survey, and the other one's a citizen survey. So the officer survey will be first because it's easier, and I should say more feasible, not easier. And then we will work on the citizen survey. Of course, the most recent incident is the review of the Starbucks incident that occurred. We want to understand as much as possible and gather as much information as possible.
Did you distribute copies of your statement?
I did. There's bullets that went around. Everyone seems to have it in front of them.
No, the audience has it.
Oh no, the audience is, I'm sorry, I didn't know if they had it or not.
It's okay.
Okay, all right. It's just bullets.
We can share some copies.
Oh, this statement, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, no, I don't know who did that. Did we do that?
Okay.
I can make copies if you need.
No, it's actually 15 copies over here.
Oh, there's 15 copies over there, okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm always prepared.
So, yes.
Thank you.
So as Rhonda mentioned, there's a statement the PAC released on this. It's also on Facebook and Twitter, so you don't have to think about all of it. But effectively, the idea for us is that there is nothing on its face that says these officers that responded were doing anything illegal, or that they acted against their job responsibilities, or that anyone involved was doing anything illegal. However, something not so great happened, and it's a worthy conversation about how we can improve this, what issues of race and racism were at play, and what can we do to have a more thoughtful conversation about what this means and how this informs not only the PAC's work, but the city at large. So, and we're looking forward to that. Shortly before coming here today, I spoke with Rue Landau. Rue is the executive director of the Human Relations Commission, and they are working on a review of their own, and we determined or discussed that it is worth us working together on that. So we can have a more comprehensive, holistic view on what occurred here and understand that from a different point of view. So I'm looking forward to working with Rue on that. I'm not entirely sure what the end product is going to look like, but we are going to work together and at least share resources. And finally, just the kind of the nuts and bolts. We did get 14 complaints since our last meeting, and all have been forwarded to the Internal Affairs Bureau for investigation. Any questions? Only everything? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So for the folks who just joined us, consistent with our usual procedure, we have our regular business of our meeting, and then we open it up to the public. So the next item on our agenda is a presentation from the Victim Services Board. So we have Deja Park with us this evening. Thank you for joining us.
I don't know where to stand.
You want to take this seat so you have an area to look forward? I'll sit in the audience here. All right, great.
Hi, my name is Nizah. I'm the Manager of Information Services in South Philadelphia. We're actually just like 2 blocks behind. Oh, hi. Sorry, that was one of the officers that we work with a lot. From the 3rd District. So we are a nonprofit organization that provides direct services to victims of crime, witnesses and their families. So we do that in a multitude of ways. First, if an individual would like assistance with filing a police report, if there's a language barrier that exists as well, or they just generally want don't really understand what the process is like, we can accompany them to the stations, to the 1st, 3rd, or 17th here in South Philadelphia. Another thing that we do is each of the advocates are assigned to a caseload. So each week we pick up the Part 1s and the police reports from the 3 districts in South Philadelphia. We identify victim and witnesses that could qualify for services through our organization, and then we do direct outreach. So one of the things that we can do with the clients that we work with is there's a state funding called Victims Compensation Assistance. And what that does is it helps reimburse victims of crime for any excess expenses they have because of a crime. So if they have been assaulted and they didn't have any medical insurance, we can assist them with trying to help pay for those excess medical expenses, lost time from work because of an incident, transportation costs, medication costs, counseling costs, funeral costs, and then the list goes on and on. The state can reimburse a victim up to $35,000 in excess expenses. So I know when after an incident occurs, we often see like GoFundMe pages online to assist with like excess expenses when there's a program where we can directly help that family. And there's no time limit on our services. We have clients that work with our agency for more than 5 or 6 years. We really work with people to the extent in which they feel like they need us, and then when they don't, we kind of part ways. We also staff the preliminary hearings at the Criminal Justice Center if an arrest has been made. So if we are sort of a way to have a first point of contact with victim and witnesses of crime, and to explain to them what the court process is like, help them communicate with their district attorney, any sort of questions or concerns about the process. If they need help communicating with their detective, we can help with that. If they want us to do court accompaniment in the future, we can also assist with that. So those are just kind of a multitude of services. We also understand that South Philadelphia has a lot of immigrant communities. And so we have an advocate we have 2 Spanish-speaking advocates, a Cantonese-speaking advocate, and a Vietnamese-speaking advocate, and a Thai-speaking advocate. And we also use language line interpretation services for any other languages that might need assistance with. So that's sort of a synopsis. Anybody has any questions?
Thank you. How do we reach you?
Yeah, so you can find us at Victim Witness Services South Philadelphia. That's our website.
Victim Witness Services all over.
Of South Philadelphia. And we service the South Philadelphia community, but there's a Victim Witness Service agency in each section of the city. So there's like Victim Witness Services Northeast, Center City, West, and we all have websites, and we all pretty much offer the same services.
Thank you.
My question was, if I live in West Philly and I'm a victim of a crime in South Philly, who services me?
So it's optional.
Okay.
So if you prefer to work, you might live in West Philly, but you might maybe work in South Philly, so you're there a lot. So if you want to work with South Philly Victim Services, that's an option. If you want to work with West, then that's an option.
Is the services only obtainable by Philadelphia residents, or anyone who encountered some kind of assault or in city limits?
So every state has their own victim service program, and it varies. If you are, however, we've had instances where there was someone from England who got assaulted while they were visiting Philadelphia, and we were able to assist them. The same is the circumstance if someone lives in New Jersey but was a victim in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So kind of like, if it happens here, then we can provide the services.
I have a question. With regards to the funding, does it cover a funeral expense?
Yes, it does. So it can cover up to $7,000 under for funeral expenses. It also covers expenses, let's say that if you have family, or if you come from another country and you wish to be buried in another country, the transportation costs and such things like that can be covered as well. But yeah.
If it's a crime, if it was a shootout, if the police show that the victim was at fault, then they're not eligible.
That's under review by the state. They are trying to determine the eligibility component, because in the past that was the circumstance. If the victim or witness was found to be engaging, in illegal activity, then they would be declined. That's being reviewed by the state victim services, but hasn't been finalized yet.
This will be my last question. Does immigration status, meaning do you have to be a documented resident to receive these services?
No, you don't. If you do not have documentation, you can still work and receive compensation, victims' compensation, and we have an advocate who specializes in particular. We're working with immigrant and undocumented victims of crime.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
And the source of your funding, is some of that from restitution that people pay after conviction, or where else does money come from the fund?
Yeah, the funding, so for our office, it's like a private funding. We have a contract with the district attorney's office, and in regards to victims' compensation assistance, that does come from a larger fund that is from individuals who pay a certain fee that goes into this account. It's largely gotten a lot of money because it doesn't just collect money from the smaller crimes, but also big sort of like corporate crimes as well, like from banks and things like that. It goes into this fund that's redistributed out.
Thank you. We have a question from the librarian.
What determines if someone is eligible for your services?
I mean, if they were a victim of a crime.
Does it have to be reported to the police? That's my...
In order to get compensation, in order to get victims' compensation assistance, they do have to file for a police report. So for victims' compensation, they don't reimburse personal property damage or loss. So when we have a lot of people that say they've gotten their iPhone stolen or their car stolen, things of that nature wouldn't be covered. But if there were like medical instruments, if they're elderly and their main source of income is Social Security benefits, then that's sort of the exception where money will be reimbursed. But we always try to meet with everybody anyway, just to figure out, they might not be able to qualify for victim services, but they might need resource information. They might need to know who to contact through the courts or the police department.
Okay, it just here, what I see is it ties in a lot with the immigration status, and people are afraid to go to the police.
Yeah.
So they could still maybe talk to somebody at your organization and find different resources.
Yeah,
okay.
we collaborate with a lot of the other organizations like HIAS, who provides free legal services for immigrant victims of crime. And we have a lot of clients all the time who come in who are undocumented, and we will go with them to file a police report.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you for sharing that information with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
The next item on our agenda is old business. I don't think we have any old business. Or not any old business we're tackling at this point. So the next item, open up the meeting to public comment. Please.
So, as you may know, I'm interested in the contract, and I was interested in committees being formed. Is that the contract procedures, would that fall under the Policies and Procedures Committee that was discussed at the beginning of the meeting?
So there is a group, we talked about somebody having a subcommittee look at those contracts. I think that we have decided that we can encourage members of the public to work on those committees, but I think that the committees are limited to the commission.
I don't understand that. Me either. You're going to encourage people to, members of the commission can be on the committees, and the public can be encouraged to do what?
So we know that for some of the folks, they have on their own tried to get copies of the contracts. They've tried to look at comparable documents. So if we look at what our charge is on the commission, that looking at the arbitration documents, looking at the contract is a bit beyond the charge. So we encourage the community to look into these matters. I mean, that's how we think that change will happen, or the attention will be paid.
So beyond the committees of the Police Advisory Commission?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sir.
name is Julie Chavanis. I'm a trans civil rights lawyer. I'm also a trans woman as a resident of the city. And I'm here to speak on a matter that is 15, almost 16, 15 and a half years old, which is the death of a black trans woman while in city custody. Her name was Nizah Morris. The city has, in one form or another, hidden, destroyed, refused to look for, etc., the records of how Nizah died while in city custody. Those are not my words. Those are the words of this board in a report, or this commission, in a report dated May 28, 2013, where this commission set out in excruciating and painful and horrible detail the fact that this woman's death while in city custody is a mystery, because the city's hiding, had hidden, doesn't have, theoretically, etc., documents relating to her death. The new district attorney said last week, or maybe a week and a half ago, District Attorney Krasner, that there is no further investigation. The investigative privilege is what was holding these documents back from production. So I am here on behalf of myself as a resident of the city, on behalf as a lawyer for Justice for Nizah, a committee here in the city, and a vulnerable trans woman, although not of color. I couldn't imagine that world. If I had been killed while in city custody, it would have been solved the next week. But not Nizah's death. So I'm asking that the commission, upon suitable request, whatever form that might be, adopt a recommendation that all documents be produced in the Nizah Morris case, and specifically those are referred to by District Attorney Krasner as in the ordinary course of the city business and no longer under investigative privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you know, and as you mentioned, we, various members of this commission, previous members, looked at the Nizah matter, and we did produce a painstakingly accurate report. And we produced that report relying on documents that we had seen at the district attorney's office, and that we included them as the appendix. So those are the documents that we had access to, and we put together that report. We developed, as you both know, a list of recommendations, most of which were adopted by then Commissioner Ramsey. We understand the frustration. We concluded that report that there was an unsolved homicide in Philadelphia. We also acknowledged the limits of the Police Advisory Commission. In the same way with the response to the other question, you know, we have our charge and we have our limits. That doesn't mean that we don't fully support and encourage the community to do more. And I think that it's tremendous that Tim Swick, sitting next to you, has kept this issue alive, because an answer should be had. It is an unsolved homicide in the city of Philadelphia. In terms of what we can do in our level of authority, I'm not sure specifically what you're asking for. We don't have any other documents. You know, we issued the report.
I am asking to the extent it's within your authority, because the other report made clear you had reached the extent, you said this, we have reached the extent of our investigative authority, like that's almost a quote, but to the extent you can within the policy scope and the scope of your authority, adopt the recommendation that the city produce all documents relating to Nizah Morris.
So with regard to the police department, we've already had the recommendations that we could with regard to those documents. I mean, we're not aware of any other documents. There's nothing else.
I don't want to get into a fight about with them, with the city or anything. Let's just start anew and make a big umbrella, which is we adopt a resolution that all documents relating to Nizah Morris should be produced since 2002. And if you want to have a qualifier, I would say, which means all those identified by District Attorney Krasner is not under the investigative privilege. which is the only reason for holding him back really under an RTKO request. So that would be, I mean, let them deal with the district attorney's office, but I've also asked the Commission for LGBT Affairs for the same support. Because the more community-based support we have, and as Mayor Kenny said, who supports this, because when I testified 2 years ago on racism in the neighborhood, he was back there applauding away on the Nizah stuff. The more support we have from the various commissions, this will happen. This is almost 15 and a half years old, and it's a tragedy. And again, it's, to me, it embodies racism. I mean, because it wouldn't happen with me, a trans woman, a white trans woman. It wouldn't be the same thing.
Can I ask you a legal question?
Yeah.
What steps have you taken to obtain documents? So in other words, is there a
Tim
court
has
order out
been
there?
fighting it forever. He
You
can
know what, I
talk,
can answer that.
he could talk to, well, hold on one second, just to give you a real quick big picture. Tim has been fighting it forever. As you said, Tim gets all the credit for this.
Oh, you all get credit.
Whatever. I mean, nothing's happened yet.
I just want to know what the
but anyway, I have a big picture requested, and Tim has a very detailed one.
Which I won't go into all the details, but this would just be a pointed question, well, in addition to her request for the recommendation of community access to all the records. Somebody was in a police car, she ends up brain dead in the street. Obviously, there's community questions about what happened. People want to know, and there's a committee, the Nizah committee wants to know everything we can about this, and then just let Nizah go to rest. The main problem is that what the police told the DA is very different than what the police, if you go to the PAC website, it just has a different story in significant ways. There's supervisory input that apparently went into this, where a supervisor okayed this ride, whatever.
Okay, I want you to focus for 1 minute on this question.
Okay,
what have you done? Yeah,
yes,
the document.
that's what I want to say. I was able to obtain, and I'm probably the only person in the city who has obtained a document saying Mr. Swift gets all the records that, it calls for transparency, and I shared this with Hans and Marcel. We have a court order saying transparency is of the utmost importance. In the Nizah case, I think this is a rather unique court order, and it happened under Mayor Nutter's administration. So what I would like to ask, without belaboring this point, in addition to hers, could I meet with Hans and somebody from the city solicitor's office at their convenience? I don't want to take a lot of time, because I do think there are some records that the PAC would be willing to share, aside from this Larry Krasner issue of, because I'll tell you right now, there's a 50-page internal affairs report. I still don't have access to this. And that's just a basic internal affairs report.
I think we want to be, sorry, Hans, we want to be clear about, certainly we can't speak for the city solicitor. In terms of the records the PAC has, we don't have any of those records.
No, you do. You have, Kelvin told me before he left, you have the internal affairs report, because that was shared. It's among those three-ring binders, you have huge amounts.
So we extracted from those reports the relevant documents, and they were attached as the appendix.
No, a list of the documents were attached, not the documents themselves.
No, in our report.
In your report, it's just a list of the documents.
And some of them you said we couldn't identify these because we are under that NDA. So you couldn't even talk about some of them.
Not in the second report.
No, but I'm sorry, the first.
In the first report.
In the second report, it's just
the
a
second
list.
report, but you also have two exhibits that are missing documents or that weren't reviewed.
No, but what you're saying, they do list the documents you use, but it's just a list saying like, director blah, blah, blah. Like, it does, we don't have the actual documents that we want to read, and there's a lot.
Who is the judge who is?
Oh, Judge Greenspan, and she later became a Supreme Court judge.
Right.
Your
so
staff.
And so what judge now would enforce Judge Greenspan?
Oh, it's enforced by Common Pleas Court, just because she's not on anymore.
Okay, so this is my, I'm not trying to be rude or anything.
No.
What makes you think that this commission has more authority than a judge?
No, I'm just saying before, and I'm willing, I don't want to go into court, but I am willing if it need be. I would just, you're supposed to exhaust all your remedies locally. I would like to meet with the city solicitor and Hans if you're willing to. And there may be some meeting of the minds, just like the young lady from the Victim Witnesses said. We always like to try to meet and see what we can do. Before I mean, who wants to be in a battle in the court with the PAC is here to encourage trust with the community.
Well, first, let me say, you're not incorrect about that last statement, but the PAC is not the city advisory commission, it's the police advisory commission, right? So I think that, if I'm hearing you correctly, we all understand in the room that this is not a police department decision. Is that generally correct?
Not a what?
A police department decision. In other words, the police department can't give you, don't have the records that you want.
Oh, yes, the police department has a 50-page internal affairs
No,
report.
the DA or the city solicitor is the
Yeah.
linchpin. But
So-
you see, we have a problem with that, Hans, because lawyers do what clients tell them, not
Right.
the other way around.
Well, that what I guess what I'm trying to say is that right now, the argument or the conversation is with, and as I understand it anyway, with the DA's office, and they have a new DA who ran quite an aggressive campaign on this type of issue. So I would be surprised, and I've been on the emails, so I know
We
you haven't got a
just
response.
got an email.
Oh, so you got a response?
Just today,
Great.
right. Yeah.
So I understand that. I guess to the points that are being made so far is, I'm happy to say now that I support the transparency argument. I think that the PAC has already written a report that says this should happen. I don't know what else we can really do. I'm happy to meet with you.
Okay.
I meet with people all the time. You can come anytime you want, and I can't commit the city solicitor, but I can ask them if they want to join us. I just don't know that, and if the PAC can do anything more than say, yes, we agree that you should have this. But to many of the points that are being made here, there's probably people who are actual decision makers here on this. But I do want to take a step back and say that I respect greatly the work that you guys are doing. It isn't easy to show up to a meeting in South Philadelphia to talk about this, to write the many emails you've written about it, and to stay dedicated to something for over a
I'm going to
decade.
kill the city in the end.
So, there we go.
Kidding.
So, I totally respect it, and I don't want to sit here and
No, I
seem...
get that. I totally get that.
I just don't want to seem like we're blowing you off. I just want to make sure that...
Yes.
Was there,
I totally.
was an investigative file produced pursuant to Judge Greenspan's
The whole reason that came about is because they lost the file.
Yes.
When Rhonda took this up, they did find a partial file, but it's missing many things. It's missing 911 tapes, for instance. This is a whole long story. But just to get back to your point, Larry Krauser's papers are one thing. The
Internal affairs document.
yes, he would not even have that. The internal affairs, this is what Kelvin told me. They have a 50-page internal affairs investigative file, and which makes sense because you work with the internal affairs when you do your investigations. That's just one example. I don't want to belabor this point. We need a meeting. I really would hope we could have that.
I don't want to publicly state this, but I offered you a meeting, and you said you wanted to come here instead. So I will re-offer the meeting, and we can meet whenever you'd like.
Sounds good.
Okay,
and
great.
if somebody, the point person from the city solicitor, I know you can't promise, but if you could ask them.
I will certainly ask them if they're available.
And then as far as her request about just enacting
Well, I was done talking.
no, but they haven't responded. Will you pass that resolution?
I think
Calling
that
for
we need
transparency.
And I'm not calling for it tonight. If it's something you want to have Jim and take on, I'm happy to refine it.
And I think that you've heard clearly from us, clearly from Hans, that of course we believe in transparency. I want us to have clear expectations. I feel that because we have been a receptive ear, because we care deeply about this, that you kind of look to us to do more. And if there was more that we could have done, we would have done more then.
No, and I get that, but I also understand that sometimes we could pursue policy statements that maybe we don't think about just because we're not necessarily in that area. But as the mayor said, get in it. So if I could send you a email with a specific policy statement, maybe you could consider it before the next meeting. So it's clear what we're asking and whether it's within the commission's scope.
I think that would be helpful to have
All right.
it.
All right, yeah, I don't want to whipsaw anyone. And
No, that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But I think it would be helpful to get a clear sense, a discrete sense of what you're asking.
I will absolutely do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
And Kim, you remember us how many years we worked on that?
I'm going to be
Day in
80
and
years
day
old
out.
with the cane saying, I
Every
want my Nizah Morris Case.
What do you mean gonna be?
And we tried our
I'm
best.
almost there now.
As the chair said, I remember I was not a
Yes,
lawyer.
of course.
Thank
I was not the lawyer, so I didn't know those technical details. But I know we just spent so many hours after hours. Finally, we came up with a report. Don't forget, PAC has a limitation, which the court don't have.
Yeah.
Everything you are taking, that would work faster than through the PAC, because we did whatever we can. We were insistent, this file is missing. You brought us all the police reports from left and right. If we went there, they didn't have it, so we couldn't do anything unless whatever they give us, as a lay person, not a technical person. That's what I understand. So there we stand at this time. For what she's talking, we'll try again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, did you want to add something?
No, just that I wanted to understand the legal issue. And, you know, just, so I think what I understand now is you can go to the court to enforce it. It's not the enforcement issue, it's that you think somehow they're missing documents.
No, not missing, you have it now, and rather than me go to court, I think it's a wonderful, I hope you can attend, if you're, are you a staffer of PAC?
She's counsel to the PAC.
Oh, great,
yes. But that's what I'm trying to, but what I guess what I'm not understanding is, if there is a court that's enforcing this, and you think there are documents out there that have not been produced to you, the court has so many more teeth.
Right, but I'm saying that the best fight is a fight you don't have to fight, and it sounds like we wouldn't have to resort to court if we could have a meeting.
We are volunteering for this.
Right, and I'm also familiar with Gail Sproul. I know she's now moved to New York.
Yes,
but
Mike Burry is the point person with that, but
right,
but no, I think this is wonderful. We'll have the meeting, see if there's some records that we can just get access to, aside from Larry Krasner's. I'm talking about the ones in the PAC.
Well,
and if
let
it doesn't
me
work, it
manage your
doesn't work.
expectations. That's not going to happen. I can't give you records. Those aren't our records, right? So those are police department records that you're asking for. I'm not even sure we have them. But if we do have them, I want to manage expectations here.
Right.
Those are not ours to disclose. If you can use your court order to get them, but they're not. I can't hand over records that we didn't generate that aren't ours. I just want to make sure that I'm clear about that, because I don't want you to be disappointed when you come by. I still want to meet, but that's not that you aren't going to walk out with a record just for the.
No, I didn't think that. But if the city solicitor can be there as well, at least ask them, and if you could be there, at least I'll get a sense of where we stand prior to any litigation.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that you heard clearly that this isn't that, we don't want the report from this meeting that the PAC said we're turning over these records.
Oh, no. But I do get the general concept you support transparency to the extent it's possible.
We have consistently supported transparency and thought that it was important that you try to get to the bottom of it, and that's why we continue to applaud your efforts and welcome you at our meeting.
Yes, we'll see you again.
Other comments for this evening? Please.
I guess I was thinking about the policy committee and all of the stuff that you listed, and that idea of like a monthly update from the police department about how they're addressing those DOJ recommendations would be awesome. Like that sounds so useful, because that, like I know sometimes I can find out that information by going to the police website, but I think that probably isn't updated as frequently, and that just seems like that would be such a great way to find that out. So I just wanted to put that out there, that sounds terrific. And the other thing I was thinking of, I attended the hearings for the body-worn cameras last summer. That was, at least I was there for a large portion of the day, and one of the things that I came away from those hearings with was that, like, no matter what policies get adopted, that there are so many, right, that it's how the body-worn cameras are used. And so, like, whether police officers are wearing them or not, and if they're wearing them, and when they turn them on and when they turn them off, and when they can view the evidence before or after they give the report, all of those things. And one of the outside experts that testified at the end of the day, I just remember him saying that, like, what makes these most is when there are good, strong policies and there are good, strong punishments when those policies aren't followed. And I think we've seen in the news recently police officers who turn their cameras off when they pull somebody over. Like, my guess is they're not following procedure there. And so what that expert testified to at like the information that they shared at the hearings were that there have to be really strong punitive measures taken. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what people do, what rules are in place for the body-worn cameras. So I say all of that to say, I'm just wondering if that seems like that would be ripe for assessment by a body perhaps such as yours, because I know your powers are really limited, but if you can ask for those DOJ recommendations, I also wonder if you can add, like, as these
whatever's happening with these body-worn cameras, as it continues to roll out to additional districts, who's assessing what those policies
We
are
are.
and how they're working, and can that be shared with the public?
So, let me take, that, you said a lot, and thank you for that. So I appreciate your response, and I'll let the Policy Practice Committee respond as well. But the body-worn cameras is, as you referenced, one tool, right? We're not having robots police us. This is still going to be human beings wearing cameras. The cameras still have faults in that they can be obscured. They don't turn with the officer's head, right? So they're what's in front of them, and it doesn't account for a lot of the other 5 senses that an officer might have. To your point, they're also turned on, and can therefore be turned off. And so there's conversations around that. But it's important to be balanced in these responses. And so one of the things that I find very useful is understanding an officer's perspective on these things, as well as a citizen's perspective. And you mentioned punitive responses. I think that there should be a strong response from the department about when rules are violated and a graduated discipline, so to speak. I don't know that we need a summarial lopping off of heads when a camera isn't utilized properly, but I think that like every other piece of workplace equipment, there's a learning curve and a time to get used to it. And there's also extenuating circumstances that we need to be thoughtful about. So I don't disagree with you. I just don't know that I think we need to be careful about how we discuss something like discipline, for instance. I'm reminded of an incident in Philadelphia recently where an officer didn't turn on his body-worn camera, and my initial response was, that's problematic. And the more I heard about it was, I backed off quite a bit because it was a loaded gun was involved, it was dark out, and he was holding his weapon and a flashlight. And he was chasing somebody, and he was under a lot of stress. And I still think the camera likely should have been on. I don't think that he should be fired for that. I think that there should be a conversation and that he should be monitored to see if there's further incidences where he doesn't turn on his camera. But I don't want I don't want any program to turn into an opportunity for us to be unnecessarily or unfairly critical of someone who is doing their job. But to answer your question more broadly, the PAC is assessing that, is looking into that, and does have some issues, I can tell you now, with things like officer viewing, with things like buffering time. And I think there will be some recommendations about those things coming down pretty soon.
I think also in that, I believe it's SEPTA police, correct me, somebody if I'm wrong, have already instituted for a period of time body-worn cameras. Mm-hmm. And I think based on my conversations with PPD around the comparative of SEPTA to our onboarding I'm sorry, I'm a little hoarse. The onboarding of the body-worn cameras, I think that there's some learning, some lessons learned, and best case scenarios that were used within SEPTA that PPD is looking at as they are looking to roll out the body-worn cameras across the district. And so where it was a little bit more experimental with SEPTA, at least there is now, there's a deeper trial that has happened, even though we're in a rollout phase.
And I'm sorry, I think if what I was saying wasn't clear, it's less, I mean, it's more that if you're assessing, if the PAC is assessing those things, that assessment can be shared with the public. So
oh, right, and I forgot to respond to that, so I apologize.
Because that's okay, because I know I said a lot, but I just feel like that could be a service that you're doing for the, you know, I mean, like, we can certainly do those things on our own too. It just feels like if there's a body that has access to that data and 30 of us don't have to do that individually at our houses.
Yeah, so I think as a general rule and as a general reminder, the way the PAC operates is that we are going to, we issue our recommendations to the police commissioner. He has 30 days to respond. In that 30 days, he can request another 15 days. So typically around 45 days to respond. He may respond in writing, he may respond verbally, he may respond some other way. At some point after that, shortly after that, hopefully, the report that he receives will be released to the public.
And that, so I should say that there is almost no opportunity for what us to be, that what we offer to the police commissioner doesn't eventually get to you all, at least in some form, if not in whole. So yes, anything we do, you'll eventually get.
Which also brings me to a question for you, since I volunteered for it, is putting some timelines together for our next annual report.
You're asking me that now?
I'm planting the seed.
Consider planted.
Touche.
Other questions for this evening? Please.
Is the Philadelphia Police Advisory Commission, is there a national organization of police advisory commissions?
Yes.
Yes.
And is Philadelphia a member?
Yes.
And how is that useful?
So I think it's useful because it allows us to identify best practices, and allows us to identify best practices both in terms of oversight, but as well as in policing. And so I think NACOL is what it's called, and so they do a lot of on-the-ground work.
It's called?
NACOL, the National Association of Civilian Oversight.
In law enforcement.
In law enforcement, thank you.
NACOLE.
Yes, NACOL. In fact, we're going to their conference in September.
September, yes.
Yes, and we're very excited about that because it's somewhere. It's
in Florida.
It's in
Yes.
Florida. It's in Florida. Yeah.
Hurricanes.
Oh, great. The positive people in the room reminding me it's hurricane season, but still, we're excited.
It's somewhere.
We're excited to take part in that.
So we're going to the conference?
Yeah, I'm bringing below my suitcase. So yeah, and it's useful for us because the best practices are there, but also in terms of understanding where we stand as a city. So, for instance, in a budget request, we can say Philadelphia, based on our per capita, spends less or more than another city that's similarly situated. So just for that, well, maybe it's better now, and we're moving in the right direction certainly. But and so besides all of that, so again, the best practices in terms of what oversight looks like, best practices in terms of what policing looks like, and also just the comparative nature of it is very helpful. But for me, what's been great is communicating with these other boards, right? So Chicago and New York have talked to me on a regular basis, and NACOL came down when I first started and talked to me and has been in touch with me since. So it's just a good kind of support structure, so maybe we can talk about shared challenges or similar challenges and how we overcome them.
Thank you. Let's get this question was first, and then you, please.
I should know this, I'm sorry, I don't, but the May primary election, the ballot question concerning PAC on the ballot? Yes? Is it written out someplace that we can see exactly how it's?
Is there a ballot?
I believe it's resolved now with our budget. So the ballot question was related to, Anthony, can you remind me what the ballot question was?
That's floor funding for the
Right.
agency.
Yeah, so the floor funding was 500,000. Our budget now is 750. So it's more or less resolved. I don't know if it's...
Wasn't there also, you're talking about Curtis Jones?
I just want, I want to make sure I was clear about that. Our budget, the floor funding might speak about, the floor amendment might speak about future budgets. Our budget can always be slashed, so I don't know if it's going to continue or not. So when I say it's resolved, I mean it's more or less resolved for the next fiscal year. At any point, without a floor budget, I suppose it could be reduced. So I don't know if it's going to continue, but it's not an immediate concern. That, just to clarify, when I said it was resolved. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
David?
No, I just wanted to let you share.
Go ahead, Shelley.
My understanding, are you talking about Curtis Jones' resolution back in September?
So I think it's evolved a bit, all right, because there was an earlier resolution that talked about making the PAC part of the city charter, which I don't believe is still being discussed.
That's off. That's not being discussed.
I don't speak for Curtis Jones. I haven't heard more about it. I don't know. Maybe he'll bring it back up. I don't exactly know.
All right. I had heard it was going to be a charter change question.
That is not my recent information about what the amendment is, what the conversation in City Council about the PAC is. I may not be fully informed, but as far as I understand it, the only thing outstanding is the floor budget. Yeah.
Which is 500,000, but you're getting 750.
Right. But that's not set in stone. So
but
I
it
guess
could be reduced to 200.
they can reduce it to $1 if they'd like to, I suppose. Perhaps it will move forward for that reason. I don't know. I don't. We do have a meeting with City Council sometime soon, so maybe they'll bring us in on that conversation. But we haven't talked to them about that yet.
So you don't know for sure whether it's going to be on the ballot?
I do not know if it will be on the ballot. I have not heard that it's been removed. So my understanding is that it will be, but I do not know for sure where it stands right now.
And the other thing, I just wanted to let everybody know, I'm just coming, and Sheila, from the power protest at Starbucks. We started out with the 18th and Spruce and stayed there for about an hour, and then walked to, I think, 15th and Walnut, and went in there for a while, and then we tried to go into Starbucks at the Bellevue when the police were blocking us and wouldn't let us in.
We saw you there.
Did you?
As we were walking down.
Yeah. So very spirited, and you know, they got the demands, gave the demands out. A lot of coverage, a lot of energy.
A lot of police.
A lot of police. We're very dangerous people.
Well,
we prayed a lot.
I saw a lot of prayer, and we saw a lot of, perhaps an equal number of protesters and officers. David?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you said that right now on the table is $750,000 annually for the police advisory commission right now during the budget process, but it hasn't been finalized yet.
I don't have any reason to believe at this point, after the MDO, which is we're in the manager director's office budget, and the citywide budget has been discussed and debated, that it would go anything but north. And I'm not anticipating that our budget will go up, but my understanding about the budgeting process in the city is that at this point, there's not usually reductions in the proposed budget. Nothing is finalized.
And basically, I know you had talked about, and you would hire policy people.
So, you know, I can call them ice cream men if for really, at the end of the day, yes, they would focus on policy and practice, but that's really a title. Okay. They can, for instance, you know, if they were on board today, take a very granular look at this incident in Starbucks, as well as other incidents that happened. As I've mentioned in the past, I think our best path forward, our most productive path forward, is a conversation around policy, practice, and custom of the police department. Individual incidents are, for a host of reasons, not entirely the best use of our resources.
And would it be full-time, part-time? How would that be?
These would be full-time employees, full-time and fully dedicated employees.
Okay. So it would fall under the city employment?
They would be city employees.
Can you have the job if you have a criminal conviction?
Our office would have no issue hiring folks with a criminal conviction. I don't believe the city does either, so I don't see how that would be a problem.
We have bandits.
Yeah. So I would have no problem with that.
Silly question to close it out. With the increased budget, will we have donuts here at the meetings in the morning?
Well, as long as it's not from
Starbucks. I mean, was that place in Reading, the Reading terminal?
It's possible.
Yeah. Maybe Starbucks will donate. I'll put you on that if you don't mind. We did offer to volunteer, so if you want to get Starbucks to donate coffee.
Well, if they clear up their issue, then we might get talk
Well,
about that.
they laid off on demand, the manager's fault.
They layered, or did they fire her?
She's
gone.
She's mutual
agreement.
somewhere else. It's more than mutual agreement.
So she's separated from all of the company,
She's
Starbucks,
gone.
no subsidiaries, nothing?
She's gone. They will be making a public announcement that she is fired.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I saw a couple of people calling her, but.
I mean, I think she's gone, and I don't want to in any way say admonish any protesting, but there's an issue with policy and practice of Starbucks Corporation around how they're training their people to be responsive and how they're putting people in harm's way. And at the end of the day, and I've said this very publicly, I have issue with that person, that woman, whomever she is, she's in Philadelphia. And so, like, there's some serious issues with race and class in Philadelphia that we need to deal with as citizens. And Starbucks be damned, that could happen if I walked in South Philly Diner too with my black ass. So I think that there is just there's a lot of stuff we need to take care of.
Yeah, I think I agree that we don't want to miss the forest for the trees here.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a much bigger issue related to, and not that these men and their experience is not significant, and not that we shouldn't look into it overall, but I think it's symptomatic of a larger problem, if I'm hearing Erica, and I agree that we shouldn't miss that and focus too much on one part of this.
Thank you. Anything else this evening? Hearing nothing further, is there a motion to adjourn? Yeah, thank you. Second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Good night. Oh, our next meeting, forgive me, May 21st at Concilio 141 East Hunting Park Avenue. We'll see you there.